bulk update spreadsheet for data cleanup after a physical relocation, presented by Victoria Fernandez. Victoria, she, her, is an associate archivist at the New School Archives and Special Collections, where she does a little bit of everything, including processing, instruction, reference, and supervising student workers. Before coming to the New School, she worked as a processing archivist at other university archives in New York City. She has a dual MLS, MA, and a BA from Queens College, CUNY. Take it away, Victoria.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer and Jessica. I'm just gonna put the slides in the chat. They don't have a lot of text, but for anybody who might want to copy them and follow along, make their own notes, feel free. Okay. So I'm going to be talking about how we use the bulk update spreadsheet when rehousing collections for our move. This is a specific use case, but all in all, I'll say this a bunch of times throughout the presentation. I want to emphasize how much we use the bulk updater every day for small tasks, big tasks, whatever it might be. But anyway, to get started, some background about our size and makeup. The New School Archives and Special Collections is considered a medium level institution by ArchivesSpace. I do apologize. It's ingrained. I might say A space throughout the presentation, but just to get that out of the way. We have 4 full-time and 1 part-time staff members, which means we heavily rely on graduate student workers for processing work. We usually have about 2 students per year, but that fluctuates based on our budget, so we could have 1 or 3, up 1 or up to 3. Um, okay. So the bulk update functionality was developed in 2019 with Hudson Malongo, and it really didn't have a particular use case then. My director, Wendy Shear, was telling me, as you can imagine, it was helpful for data cleanup after our migration from Archivist Toolkit. But really, the simplicity, again, of the functionality makes it a tool that we use no matter what. Um, Okay, so to talk about our move, I want to like speed through the beginning, these beginning slides. But previously, our office storage and instruction spaces were in a single room. So this is a picture of what it looked like after we left. And as a result, we ended up gaining 3 separate spaces. So in this picture, you'll see this white table. I don't know if you see my mouse, but this white table at the front is where we had held classes. We had 2 tables up here. These green spaces were our desks. And then in the back, we had some high density shelving. And when we moved in September, we have now 3 different spaces that we occupy. So we've got a processing office, a research room at the top right, and then below that, you'll see our new storage space. And we knew how much space we were going to possibly lose because we didn't have high density shelving anymore. So sending collections offsite really would make the move easier. So to the bulk updater. In April, we turned our focus towards emptying our space and sending collections off-site. And that meant that we had to get 315 boxes ready for storage, all different sizes. But 245 of those were Hollinger boxes and 45 binders that we needed to rehouse. So how did we manage this? We were knee deep in so many spreadsheets, that's for sure, to make sure that we were meticulously tracking our progress. And here is where we really relied on the bulk update functionality. So I won't be doing any demonstrations. I'll have some screenshots, but to let everybody know, I was working in I think it's the V3.5, not in the new implementation where the functionality is part of the core code. But I think a lot of this will apply for anybody who is working in the new version of ArchivesSpace. So the bulk editor spreadsheet was going to be our reference for collections that were rehoused into larger containers. This screenshot is an example of one of our tracking spreadsheets, not the implementation of the bulk updater just yet. But our staff was going to rehouse into larger containers, but we had no way, excuse me, the capability to renumber folders in the months leading up to the move. So between April and September, that was going to be work for the future, but we still needed to figure out how we were going to keep track of all the work that we had done. So After doing the physical rehousing, we also used the bulk merge of top containers functionality, barcoding all of these new boxes, the long laundry list of work, adding revision statements at the collection level to reflect these new changes. That's We ended up with, sorry, I just have to move something on my screen. We ended up with a whole bunch of these funky folder numbers that you see highlighted in blue, where you've got the box is actually box 2, but the folder is 5.1, which seems like a headache, but was really good reference to tell us what the previous box and folder number was. So you'll see here 5.1 means that it was previously in box 5 and folder 1 of box 5. So this is an example of a collection that has multiple series and has about 15 series. It is a deep hierarchically arranged collection. It had 42 boxes, and it was rehoused from 36 Hollinger boxes into 13 records cartons to give you an idea of the extent of what we were dealing with. So this is a update spreadsheet, and this was our quick work, the beginning of creating temporary instances. And so this was re-imported back into ArchivesSpace so that we'd have a record of the changes. This is what it looks like after running the bulk update job. And we didn't want, basically what we didn't want was these changes to exist in a vacuum. We retained, although we re-imported the bulk update spreadsheet into ArchivesSpace, we retained that spreadsheet for reference, so that we can always have a clear indication of the previous numbering of the box and folder. For about a month after the move, we were still settling in, starting to do instruction sessions. We still didn't get to folder renumbering just yet. So these temporary instances really worked as placeholders. And we were able to update. I mean, now imagine 36 boxes worth of archival objects that we needed to change the folder numbers for, the child instances for. So this is what it looks like in the ArchivesSpace staff user interface. You'll see these funky folder numbers represented again, the 1.1, 2.1, whatever it might be. But on the front end, researchers and class visits could still request access to these collections because realistically to them, the funky folder numbers didn't matter. They were just indications to us that these collections had been rehoused. So eventually, when it was time to pick up the last task associated with our rehousing work, um, like physically renumbering the folders and again updating ArchivesSpace, we turned to the bulk update spreadsheet again. So to give you an idea of how this work was delegated, we had two graduate student workers who started in, I think it was late August, early September. Each of them were assigned a whole collection that was rehoused at any given moment. And their first step was to renumber the folders in the records cartons. And then second step was to update the child instances in a newly exported bulk update spreadsheet. So this was some of the first work that the students were doing right after being hired. And what I found was that the bulk update spreadsheet, while they weren't doing the work directly in ASpace, the spreadsheet helped them learn about the arrangement of collections, how hierarchies looked in a lot of our different legacy collections. Those were a lot of the collections that needed rehousing. And especially they got familiar with our folder naming and numbering conventions. So this was kind of like a two for benefit. And then what comes after that work was the supervisory archivist tasks. And when I say supervisory archivist, I mean any full-time, part-time staff who can review this work. Mostly, it was me looking at these boxes to make sure that the folder numbering was consistent. No, we didn't have folders that were skipped because we've experienced that in past rehousing projects. Um, I made sure to check the instances in the new bulk update spreadsheets against the renumbered folders and now re-importing the spreadsheet, the second bulk update spreadsheet, back into ArchivesSpace to update the archival objects. And that's what you see here, highlighted in green. All of these these instances were now revised. So while they could have been in completely separate boxes, they were all in box three, and their folder numbering is now consecutive. Okay. So, um, just to point to it again, so this is what it looked like in the two separate set spreadsheets. The first one on top is this previous numbering with the funky folders. That's what I'm just going to call them from now on. So you had components that might have spanned two different boxes that were now folded in a single box, and I call these ghost instances. So an archival object previously had multiple files split between two boxes, but we're now in a single box. The students were instructed, as you'll see on the bottom screenshot in the bulk update spreadsheet, they were instructed to highlight any of these ghost instances in red. And when the spreadsheet was re-imported into ArchivesSpace, I went in and make sure to delete that container instance so that we wouldn't have a misrepresentation of where this file actually lived. Um, what was really helpful too, the fact that we were working in two different iterations of the bulk update spreadsheet, is that we could always call back to the pre-exported spreadsheet to figure out any inconsistencies or confusing archival objects, particularly ones that were probably really nested archival objects that we weren't sure where they were supposed to live upon just looking at the spreadsheet or just looking at the box. And like I said, this was the case with a lot of our legacy or earlier process collections that were rehoused, where it was some of that confusion. But by having the two separate spreadsheets, one with the funky folder numbers and one with the new instances, we were able to sort through any of that, and we successfully did not have any archival objects with missing top containers or incorrect top containers, which is such a great feat because sometimes when you work on these rehousing projects and you realize that you've missed something, it's really, really hard to go back. So that's where the bulk import spreadsheet really helped us. Um, all right. And so lastly, um, again, just having both the pre-revision and post-revision update spreadsheets allowed us to consistently change box and folder numbers of digitized material found on our digital collections database, which is hosted on Collective Access. So this is an example in our new school publicity office records that is currently being renumbered. It just needs to be checked. The boxes need to be checked. So you'll see here at the bottom of the screenshot, I know this might be a little small, that the location is box 38, folder 5, and that all of the associated digitized objects in this collection will need to have their locations updated. Um, and that we were doing alongside the bulk update spreadsheet. So it served multiple purposes, not just for archive space, but here for updating digital objects, for referencing anything that we needed to double check, so on and so forth. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna end there. I know I sped through that a little bit, but I just added a last slide with any resources I found while I was preparing for this presentation. I watched the training of the update spreadsheet now in the core code, and it is really, really helpful to see what differences and what new functionalities we have. But I added also our website and my email for anybody who might be interested in the finer details of this rehousing project. And I will stop there for questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Victoria. That this was really exciting to see sort of the evolution of your work with the bulk updater, and especially like going all the way back to 2021 when you did the plugin show and tell, and now it's part of core. It's really cool to see, and it's exciting to see how you use
Yeah,
it there.
definitely.
Yeah. Wow, full circle moment. I also appreciate you showing us pictures of your space. I love seeing where people
Yeah,
work, so I
back.
thought that was fun.
It's so exciting to now have these separate spaces, but it was a lot of work to prepare and now move into. But yeah.
Very cool. Awesome. If anyone has a question, Jamie's posted this in the chat as well. There is the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Feel free to drop your questions there and I will read them out loud for Victoria.
Hmm.
Christina asks, would you be willing to share a template of your spreadsheet that people could see and maybe use?
Yeah, definitely. Christina, if you want to shoot me an email or put your maybe chat me your email, I'd be happy to send you the tracking spreadsheet and maybe an example of the bulk updater. What I forgot to actually mention that would be helpful is that when we were exporting these spreadsheets, we didn't click all of the fields to export, right? So when you're using the bulk updater, you have the option of including various notes, subnotes, etc. And in this in this example, we only needed the instances and maybe the repository processing note. So this made our spreadsheet smaller, but also more manageable.
Cool, thanks. And I don't know if you would be open to this, Victoria, but we could also share any documentation, like if you're willing to share a template on the program wiki with this recording,
Mm,
so it
okay.
could go out to the wider audience. But if you want to keep
Yeah,
it a little closer, you can do that as well.
sure. We could talk about that. Perfect.
Because I see on on Christina's question, people are chiming in with their own email addresses.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot of interest in that. And thank you, Christina, for being the first question of the forum. It always has to be a first, and now we've got a ton. So Sarit asks, what limitations did you experience with the bulk updater and moving, if any?
I think the biggest limitation was after the move trying to manage these instances that didn't exist anymore. And I've since learned that there is a way to, I think, maybe delete using the bulk updater, but basically managing those ghost instances. So I really had to explain to the students now why there are two representations of top containers in this spreadsheet, what that looks like physically, showing them that these folders were split between two different boxes, and then indicating that they need to clearly show me what doesn't exist anymore. So that was a limitation, but it really was not it wasn't any ginormous hurdle to cover. It did require some more explanation to the students who aren't familiar with how the bulk updater looks like because that was our first time using it. But other than that, I think it was I mean it really covered all our bases for the move.
Cool. Um, Sort of similar question. Corey
Mm.
asked, did you encounter any issues trying to update too many archival objects at a time?
The only issue, Corey, that we experienced, that I experienced is when I re-import the spreadsheet and the background job fails. Um, and what I noticed, what I speculate is that if our possibly if our archive space was re-indexed or the system was re-indexed in the time that it took to physically renumber that I exported the bulk update spreadsheet, the second iteration of it, and then went to re-import it, that something was failing. Um, so that was the only the issue I experienced. But other than that, I mean, there are some of these spreadsheets that have probably 400, 500 rows of archival objects. And not all of them were updated. Maybe a majority of them, say like more than 200 rows were updated. And in that instance, as long as I made sure that I think the ID and version of the spreadsheet was correct. Once I re-imported it, the background job was completely fine. So I didn't have any other issues in that.
Thanks. Hillary asks, are you recording the location of the bulk updater spreadsheets anywhere within the ArchivesSpace record?
That's a really good question. I have seen that other people might use events or other notes for this.
Yeah.
Um, we we as a staff, when we assign work, write out really thorough instructions. So the details of where these bulk update spreadsheets live is in those instructions. So we have in our internal database collection folders for every collection, and that is where I save the spreadsheets. So anybody would know to look in a collection folder because this is work that is pertaining to that specific collection. But otherwise, it's not in the ASpace record.
That's an interesting question.
Yeah.
Um, Sheer asked, just for clarity, did you delete the ghost containers manually, one at a time, once they were identified by student workers?
Yes, I did delete them
Mm.
one at a time. And they didn't appear that frequently. I mean probably I had in a collection at most four or five of them. So it really wasn't like laborious to go in and archive space. And even after that, once I was re-importing the spreadsheet to make sure that the background job successfully ran and was completed, then I would click on those. If you're familiar, the background job then refreshes with a list of all the archival objects that were updated, and I was easily able to click into that object from the background job and quickly delete the ghost container. So it wasn't like extensive manual work that I had to do afterwards.
Thanks.
Mhm.
All right. All right. And then one of our presenters, who's currently a panelist, has a question. So I'm going to read that one now. I
Sure.
noticed you have Ritter code for italics in your spreadsheet. Is that something you do just to add a design element to your PY?
Yes. So that env render italic um makes sure that the archival object title renders as italic in the and so these are exhibition titles, and in our PUI they will appear as italic.
Yeah,
That's
that
like
makes sense.
similar to adding a hyperlink or anything in the text of ArchivesSpace.
Um,
Right. Well,
yeah.
and not in the title, but yes.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, well, that is interesting because Paul, I see your comment, but I'm going to skip you just for a second. Anton also asked, I see you had the tag to apply italics. Is there a library of what can be applied in a space, or does all HTML HTML
Mm.
formatting work? Um, and that's a good question. I'm not sure in our documentation if there's somewhere where they're all listed. There are a lot of people in this meeting. If someone wants to drop some information about that into the chat, but I do know that we have a screencast related to applying tagging within ArchivesSpace that you can find in the Help Center. So I'll say that I know that exists, but I don't have time to dig into it live. So if anyone else want to point to resources, please do.
Yeah, that'd be completely helpful. I know I
Yeah.
have like my own cheat sheet of all the codes that we
Yeah.
can use. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's interesting. That I'm going to remember that you just said that.
Yeah.
And then I know we are at 9:30, but I'm going to give it like one more minute because we ran over a little bit. But if we do run out of time, because we do have several questions still in the Q&A, Victoria, if you could just answer them as text later, but I think
Oh
we'll be
yeah,
able to get to both of them. Going
definitely.
back to Paul, to what you said, Paul just wants to take a minute to point out that there is a ticket right now that you can leave comment on with a request to expand this functionality in the spreadsheet to include all fields. So if that's something you're
Mhm.
interested in, Paul links that in the Q&A. And Paul, if you want to put it in the chat too, that'd be great.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. That's super helpful. I know we follow a lot of those tickets, so okay.
All right. And then we have one, we'll do, this is our last question. If
Yeah.
any other pop in, I'll ask you to do them in chat. Sarit, I feel like you might be having a move that you're dealing with because Sarit
Mm.
has another question. Did you deal with rearranging collections in this move? And if so, were you able to handle that in the bulk updater?
Sarita, I think you asked a question in the listserv recently about updating. I asked a question about updating barcodes and you responded. So if you have anything, if you need to talk offline, we could do that. We did not rearrange collections here. So I don't have an answer to that. I think we probably have used the bulk update spreadsheet to revise instances. If we've rearranged other collections for this move, we did not. We did not have to. But that is a little bit more complicated. So the short answer is no.
Thank you. Yeah. And Sarit said just finished moving. So congratulations to
Yeah,
both of you.
congrats.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, everybody. All right. With that, that is the Q&A, and we are we're doing really great on time. So I'm going to go ahead and say we'll wrap it up there. But if anyone has any other questions for Victoria, I'm volunteering her to answer those in chat.
Yep.
But thank you so much. This was interesting, and it was a great kickoff to our virtual member forum. So I
Thanks.
appreciate
Thanks
that
for your
very much.
questions.
Yeah, that was great.